Everyone, this is update for May 3, 2023, day 434 of the war and of the date update. This is also catch up for May 1 and May 2. So today is, not today, generally over this couple days, there's a lot of strategic developments, strategic updates, and I think a lot of important developments, and we I would say, on the verge, even more important developments in the coming, let's say, 2, 3, 4 weeks. So let me just start with one quick update. In the US, the Federal Reserve increased interest rates by 0.25% to between 5 and 5.25, which I said before about two months ago or something, that all this means that the bank failures will accelerate in the US, and there will be more bank failures. That's a natural result, and I explained that video. You can look in March why it's going to be happening, and it's unavoidable. And if the rates stay where they are, and the only solution to that is reducing rates. But as I explained in that video, that will increase inflation in the US specifically, to let's say mid-teens or lower teens, and that will create extreme level of social unrest, because there are at least 50 million so in the US about 160 million people, sort of working population, it's called this way, people who work, and out of those, 50 million don't earn sort of like living wages. So basically, what this means, you go to work, but you don't earn enough to sustain yourself to continue this, and inflation puts them even in worse situation. So you can see there is this potentially huge army of 50 million people that can create unrest. And so that's what the Federal Reserve is facing, not to mention generally, you know, losing trust in US dollar as a means of savings, right? And if, as I said before, US is holding its reserve currency status because it's primarily is the tool to save, to accumulate capital around the world, not so much in the US, around the world. And so if those, call it capitalist, not in the meaning that they have a lot of, you can be capitalist with $1,000, with $500, as long as it's a capital. I'm talking about everyone who saves money and accumulates money, and by that definition, you are a capitalist. And so communists don't like you, even if you have just $100. You are already the enemy of the state. So basically, if people who accumulate capital, they see the dollar is losing its value pretty quickly, they will simply switch to something else, and something else is gold. So if you can see, the gold is actually reaching today its all-time high, about $2,000, and that's a very clear sign that for the Federal Reserve System, that okay, they have basically gone against their head, and in a way they cannot even do much. They are sort of hostage of this whole situation. So even though there is a lot of criticism for the head of Federal Reserve for increasing these rates, in some ways he has no choice, because there could be extremely disorderly collapse if he reduces rates. And that's at the same time, we'll see what happens with this bank failures that may lead to also disorderly collapse. So in a way, it's like you are between a rock and a hard place, and on top of it, you have dysfunctional political system that's really not helping you, but actually making things worse. And so you have you can get sort of like the worst of all world words. So this is the situation in the U.S. and in Europe. It's very similar. There's not much of a difference there. The problem in Europe is even aggravated by the fact that Europe as a whole doesn't have much natural resources at all. So if things gonna go really bad, Europe is gonna be even in worse situation than the U.S. and Canada and Australia. So this is situation, sort of economic, very bad economic situation. To be fair, it's the same around the world. Russia is in terrible situation economically. China is also very bad situation. So we don't have around the world sort of places to look to, or as where there is a hope that it will pull the world out of the place where we're heading collectively. So that's a quick update on this economic financial situation. Just want to reiterate what I was saying before, that there will be more bank failures coming, and how it's all going to play out. It could be easily 2008. Maybe there won't be. We'll see what happens. Then let's switch to very interesting developments that make me want to say that we moving from Cold War, not quite to hot war, but to the warm war. And what I mean is, you probably observed over past 2 or 3 days. So there were two U.S. tankers seized by Iran, captured basically, with crude oil in Persian Gulf, right? And then on the other hand, there was close to Singapore, there was Venezuelan tanker blown up. And what the tanker was doing was transferring crude oil to sort of legal white tanker. And Singapore is in a way has become like a hub for trading this black market oil. In plus, obviously, Persian Gulf plus India, but the financial hub, basically the center, is a financial center that serves all of this trade that's happening. And just for the reference, about at this point, out of the world tanker fleet, about 10% is a black market. By black market, it means Iran, Russia, Venezuela, all of these countries. So you can imagine there is a lot of money involved. There is a lot of interest, and so the point of this Venezuelan tanker that was transferring basically probably Venezuelan, or I don't know exactly, might be Iranian, but tanker is definitely Venezuelan. So it was transferring probably oil to sort of white tanker, and apparently it was attacked, and as a result you have that fire. So it looks like there is sort of kind of like that's why I'm saying is there's like a warm war basically happening with all of this marine crude oil traffic. And this is why for China it's extremely important to have pipelines directly to Russia, because then they have guaranteed supply of crude oil in case of the hot war. That's another important development. That's very, I would say, concerning, dangerous, and hopefully this warm war will not turn into hot one. In case it will, I'm actually gonna look. We're gonna look today at Chinese Air Force and compare with the U.S. So I'm gonna compare 2 airplanes. Well, actually 3. So the first one is F-22, which is US one. This one, as you can see here, this is F-22. Then there is a J-20, which there is some Chinese name. It's just how it's called in the West. I don't know the name in Chinese. So it's J-20. So both of these airplanes are the most advanced airplanes, the so-called 5th generation. Technically F-35 is 5th generation, but let's call it 5th generation minus, and this airplane's, let's say, 5th generation plus. And so what's happening with all of that. So, and let me explain why it's plus and minus. And this is just my terminology. You can, other people may use whatever they want to use. But let me explain you why. These two airplanes, they are twin engine, as you can see, right? The F-35 is a single engine. So that's hopefully everybody understands. That's more power, it's more maneuverability, and so on. So it's better, right, in terms of its ability to intercept, to catch, to evade, and all, and so on. So it's basically higher probability of winning air fight, right? So as you can imagine, F-35, all else being equal, is gonna lose in air fight between, let's say, with J-20 or F-22. Doesn't matter. We're just looking purely on the sort of airplane quality, without considering where it belongs and who it belongs to and so on. The key feature of these two airplanes, it's their engines, which they have two, and their ability to have sustained supersonic flight without using engine afterburners. So what this really means is they can fly fast for longer than any other plane, and that's really key. And then the maneuverability is much so the power to weight ratio is much better for these two. So they basically outmaneuver any other airplane on Earth so far. But basically, there's no competitors for these two. Well, there is Russian in development, but that just let's say it's not going to materialize anytime soon. Let's put it this way. So as you can now that there, let's just look. So we now hopefully we understand why F-35 is not really good airplane, right? So hopefully it's very clear to everyone that power to weight ratio is very low there. It's not maneuverable enough, so it's not going to be it's not good airplane. It's not comparable quality. The problem for the West and US is that US stopped producing F-22. I don't remember, like about 10 years ago or something, plus minus. So there are less than 200 of those, about 180 or 190 of those in service in the US. I don't know if they were exported. I don't think they were. But basically, that's it. US does not produce these airplanes anymore. Now let's switch to China. So China is producing J-20, and here the reason I'm showing this engine is because they started producing them, this J-20, around 2016, 2017. However, they did not have right engine to have sustained supersonic flight for a long period of time, and they put just kind of like a intermediate engine. First one was Russian. Then they developed internal WS-10, it's not quite there, and they finally they developed WS-15, which is that on the picture, I believe, that allows to basically, as I said, sustain supersonic flight, and so the Chinese produced less than 50 of J-20 with this WS-15, which makes it comparable, actually arguably better than F-22, but very marginally. And there isn't even I would say marginally better if you look at the exhausts in the US and the Chinese one. Chinese one is, you see the small sections, which means you can much more precisely direct power, versus here it's more up and down kind of approach, it looks like. Don't know, maybe if I'm wrong, might be wrong, but just looking just externally, there is more precision in J-20, looks like, than in F-22. But regardless, you can say for all intents and purposes, they are very comparable. They pretty much the same. So as you can see, in a way, China is still, at the very early stages, kind of like not ready, because it then only has like, let's say 50 J-20 versus US has close, let's say call it 200, just to make it easy, right? So in a US is still outnumbering, but uh, within a short period of time, I don't know, year at most two, it's gonna lose its position. And F-35, as I said, is not a match. US has about 450 F-35, and they definitely better than whatever else China has. So in other way, the Chinese need to have at least 600 of J-20s to have clear air superiority over US. How quick they will close this gap is remains to be seen. So this is we just spoke about the airplanes, and then the other part is the rockets that go with these airplanes, because airplane is just the carrier for the rocket, right? So the whole weapon is the rocket. So if you add the rocket, which are better than the US ones, plus this airplane that's uh, basically on par with F-22 and better than F-35, you have very clear advantage. And US only producing F-35. The US does not produce anymore F-22. So as you can see, the situation. So in a way, China may not even need, let's say, 600. Even half of those might be enough to have fight, right? Because if you think about China, they will not be completely ready for the war before the war starts. Nobody ever sort of completely ready. So they may initiate conflict even though they're not fully ready, and sort of kind of like get engaged as they need to. So this is I would say very concerning situation. And as I said and mentioned before, I have a viewer who always writes me about how Chinese are copycats and not able of anything. Well, here's the case where they copycat the extremely difficult product, and they manage to produce it in large quantities. So so as they say, don't underestimate your enemy, because you will lose. And so this might be the case. So now let's move to Ukraine. Well, actually, want to add one more thing before we move to Ukraine. That on top of other countries, it looks like South Korea also signed the agreement with Indonesia not to use US dollars as a means of payment, which I said before is not the main threat, but definitely concerning sign, because South Korea is really, I consider it part of the West, in my opinion. And the importance of South Korea, that they actually retained a very strong manufacturing base, which West would need in case of conflict. But at the same time, that strong manufacturing base is next door to China, so probably we're going to be destroyed very quickly and easily. Now let's move to situation in Ukraine, or between Russia and Ukraine. So first, Ukrainian president, in terms of this, so we're going to talk about this offensive mostly, because obviously that's sort of what highly expected. Let's put this way. So it's very clear that conflict is getting into the, I'd say, next level of intensity or next level of escalation, and you've seen, say yesterday at this point, on May 3rd, that there was attack on Kremlin, or Kremlin in English. It's there are accusations it was done by Ukraine. There are also arguments that was done by Russia just to create sort of provocation and so on. Doesn't matter who did it in the end. All it means it's going to be an escalation in the conflict. And it doesn't matter whether Russia wanted to do it or Ukraine, the end result was just two roads that lead to the same result. And that's what's really important in all of that. And so this really means escalation and extreme escalation and conflict, where the chances of using tactical nuclear weapons are rising significantly. And that might be a reason why Ukraine got recently this radiation meters, I don't know, dosimeters they called in Ukraine. So in case something happens, I guess. I mean, Ukraine is capable of producing those, but I'm not sure. Maybe it just needs to be connected, so basically, U.S. and West can sort of have a proof of what's going on there on the ground. But so that was, and the situation in Russia is very tense in terms of the majority of population is asking, where's our response? We need to do something very sort of negative, aggressive towards Ukraine. This is going back to all these people who are thinking that this is just a question of Russian president. The Russian president is, I would say, the most balanced person you can get out of Russia, and so there is no response. And typical approach in Russia. Okay, this Tsar is not real. Let's throw him out and let's have real Tsar that can, hit very hard. And so this is, in a way, Russian political and political top is in Russian president is an extremely difficult situation, because people demand sort of blood, and in the escalation, as I said, there is the only way to kind of like extract a lot of blood from Ukraine is to use tactical nuclear weapons, and because otherwise Russian military is not capable of achieving, sort of impressive results, and so the danger is going up very clearly, and that's why I mentioned about escalation. There is another thing that's happening in parallel is, and that escalation might be a response to what's been happening, to preparation for this future offensive, where the Russian top is considering using tactical nuclear weapons, because they fear that just land forces will not be, sort of conventional forces will not be able to withstand Ukrainian offensive, and the front line may collapse, and they need to do something about that, or they're going to lose power in Russia. So there might be sort of preparation for that future sort of response. At the same time, there's very clear that Ukrainian offensive is sort of in the final stages of preparation. Ukrainian forces are actively sort of attacking railroads and railroad transportation in Bryansk region. This is where Bryansk region is. So it's called like railroad war. Basically, they blowing up, the trains with cargo, and there were like yesterday one train, and then on May 3 another one. So essentially, this is becoming, and this is very like foresty area here. I mean, generally, this whole Belarus is foresty, and this is essentially, I mean, you can see even from the map. This was where the Soviet partisans, and I don't know, guerrilla in English, were very active, and basically German troops never fully controlled the area. So it was, there was also a very active railroad war against the German forces, and supply and logistics there. So this is the area where this is a perfect area for that, and this is obviously to paralyze the traffic, to reduce the traffic towards Ukraine, and from that perspective, to make the offensive more successful, it's a right move. Then the other steps that are being done by Ukrainian side is attacking supply of fuel. So there was one hit in Sevastopol. They blew up one tank, I think, or two. I think it was one tank. Then there was another one terminal here on the Black Sea. There's like a tiny village called in Port Volna, I think. And then just recently, I learned that there is another attack here at the oil refinery here near Krasnodar. So as you can see, Ukrainian side is trying to do whatever they can to limit supply of fuel so that Russian defensive, Russian forces that will be defending their positions, that they have at least temporary shortages of fuel, which will be critical because then they less mobile, and then there is higher chance of penetrating and success. There is no question that there will be no sort of permanent long-term shortage of fuel for Russian forces in Ukraine, just because there's a lot of either refineries and so on. But what it does, it creates temporary shortages, and that's good enough because you really need just to breach the defensive line, and then the rest it's like a house of cards. It falls after that. So you really just need a short-term sort of problem for this. So again, so this is confirming that the offensive in the last sort of stages and will be launched sometime soon. Another indicator in terms of timing is the Ukrainian president right now is on tour in Europe. So he went to Finland, and now he's in Netherlands. Then he's supposed to, I know the whole list of countries, but so I believe the last one is Germany, and he's going to be there on May 14, probably leaving on May 14 or maybe May 15. So most likely that this offensive is going to start sometime after May, very shortly after May 15. Let's put it this way. And this is sort of most probable. It's possible it's going to start even when the Ukrainian president outside of country, but I would be very, very surprised at that because he's very, I'd say, very controlling, micromanaging person on the personal level. So I'll be surprised. So most likely it's going to happen very shortly after May 15. So that's what's going on with this upcoming offensive. Now let's do a quick walk through the front line. And we're going to do it in a clockwise fashion, as I always do. So first, the situation along the state border. As I explained already, there is active war, active activity on both sides. Well, obviously, in the Ukrainian side, it's more active, as I explained, with the railroad war and so on. But the Russian forces are just shelling Ukrainian sort of nearby towns and villages in retaliation. But beyond that, it doesn't. And then another thing that I wanted to mention that there was sort of possibility of this attack, Ukrainian offensive being directed against, let's say, Belgorod. This is where it is. This Russian town, regional capital, and I think there was a day or two ago, German chancellor, which is prime minister, best sort of equivalent would be. He said that that all of these weapons that Europe and US gave, that they cannot be used on the Russian territory. So that's probably was kind of like a signal to Ukrainian president, to Ukrainian top. Okay, this upcoming offensive has to be focused on so it's not going to be sort of more creative than it could be. So it has to be pretty straightforward, pretty direct, very obvious to the Russian side. Let's put it this way. And that's probably, as I said, most likely it's Zaporizhya section of the front line. So now let's move to North Lugansk front line. Things here are quiet. There's always this sort of skirmishes in this large forest here, but essentially there's nothing really happening here on this front line at this point. Then let's move to North Donbass. Things here are also very quiet. There's the only interesting update I want to give is that looks like there was uh, probably I would say call it company from Russian 123rd Brigade that managed to penetrate Ukrainian defensive positions in Bilohorivka about a week ago. But then, they were sort of encircled and separated from the main Russian forces, and they basically, by this point, pretty much all of them destroyed. But just want to let you know that there was interesting development, and what is another interesting part of it is that this company, even though technically it's 123rd Brigade, that this is consists from prisoners. Similar idea to Wagner mercenaries, where you sign the contract, 6 months contract, and you serve, and if you're still alive at the end of 6 months, you basically you're free. So this is what I mentioned also before, that regular Russian military, seeing this sort of success of Wagner Group, decided like, okay, well, we're not gonna let you have all the fame. We're gonna just replicate this. And what the Russian military is learning, that simply repeating it, what Wagner mercenaries are doing, is not gonna work, because it requires entrepreneurship, and Russian army is a Soviet bureaucracy, so that's why it fails, and it's never been going to be able to successfully use these people, and this is a small example of that. So anyway, so this is now let's actually so Wagner mercenaries. So just want to give you okay, let's just look at this map. I don't even see point in updating it. It's just very slow squeeze. It's basically the way the head of Wagner mercenaries describes, they capturing, like I don't know, like 50,000 square meters per day, or 30 or 40. So as you can imagine, it's pretty much nothing these days. Um, and basically, at this pace, if this continues, it will take them another like 2 months to completely squeeze Ukrainian troops from the remaining parts of Bakhmut. And in the process, they will lose at least 6,000 people dead, which also means that the total loss is going to be close to 20,000. So, and since we already know that Wagner Group is on how to say, doesn't have many people, so this really means that they will, if things, if we do straight line extrapolation, they will not be able to close sort of the deal. They will not be able to completely squeeze Ukrainian troops from Bakhmut unless they get more shells or get more people. At this point, what they got is the most they got. So in a way, it's actually it's a reverse of the Stalingrad battle, basically, where German troops pretty much controlled, let's say, also like 90% of the town or whatever, even more, and something similar is here. But then they got completely exhausted and sort of done, and then the Soviet side launched counteroffensive and created pincers and created encirclement, and the rest of the story. So something similar situation is extremely from that perspective ripe from action, some similar action to this. At the same time, it doesn't look that Ukrainian army has enough to do two offensives at the same time. Basically, the main offensive, in my opinion, is going to be on the Zaporizhya front line, because that's really where the most strategic opportunity is, and there's not enough to do it here as well. They may, I would be very surprised if that happens, but But the opportunity is there. It's just strategically there is not much in terms of further development of this opportunity, because it will require much more resources to do once you sort of, let's say, capture Bakhmut or liberate Bakhmut and Soledar and everything. You basically hitting the wall that requires a lot of resources, doesn't lead to anything large. So and just for the reference, so like what's the size? There's some information in terms of um, how many people already went through Wagner group in terms of these prisoners who served, and then they finished their 6 months term. So it's 26,000. So as you can imagine, it really means that if you include dead, wounded, remaining troops, and troops that did not, the core, which is another 4 to 6,000, maybe 3 to 6,000. That's really the core of the skeleton of the Wagner group that really defines it and really makes it what it is. Uh, so, so the total sort of flow of people is probably between 70 to 80, maybe even 90,000 people that went through Wagner Group through over, let's say, past, let's say, since, let's say, summer of the last year. So that's actually much more than initially I estimated. It was like closer to 40,000. That looks like they are actually double that size. So now let's keep moving here. So as I said, there's just this pressure in Bakhmut at this point. And then now let's move to central Donbass front line. Here there are some Russian attacks, but they're not sort of terribly strong. They're not really, they're more sort of tactical, relatively low scale attacks. As always, from Pisky salient, then in Marinka, this continuous attempt to capture this Marinka, which is turning into kind of like a Verdun from World War One. And then attacks in Novomykhailivka. But essentially, it's also relatively quiet. This is Avdiivka. Russian troops ended up not capturing it. So, in terms of Russian side is also preparing for the upcoming offensive, and one clear sign of that is the most prominent Russian let's call it war reporters, or I guess the I think the closest, the best way to describe it is German army had in World War II had propaganda companies, and this is exactly what these people are. They part of the army. They not some journalists as they being sort of presented or anything, except organizationally they probably part of KGB, not actually army. But but basically all of those prominent ones are already on the Zaporizhya front line behind Russian lines, probably preparing to sort of to show to basically present the propaganda shows to people in terms of how successful Russian troops are defending and responding to Ukrainian offensive. So as you can see, there's not, this is also Russian side is anticipating this offensive on Zaporizhia front line. There was just a quick look here. There was some probing attack by Ukrainian troops out of Orikhiv, directly straight on this road. It was just probing attack, nothing major there. I mentioned before there were probing attacks about I think more than a month ago as well. So sometime I think in March. But this one is definitely situation is getting closer to final resolution of this situation. And also as you can see, there is also more Russian troops. Now there's 42nd Division here. There's definitely sort of Russian side is not sort of unaware. It will not be surprised, which is obviously decreasing chances for success for Ukrainian side. So we'll see how it all plays out because there's very high expectations and unfortunately, the way they were built up by the propaganda in the West and in Ukraine as well, and it if there is no sort of decisive success, it will lead to very bad psychological sort of responses in Ukraine and in the West that will lead to very potentially could lead to very bad outcomes and for Ukraine. So that's why propaganda always hurts. It's never sort of tool that helps. It's actually, as I said many times before, it's a poison that people willing to take and self-destruct. But unfortunately, people don't learn for the most part, so they keep doing that. That's all for the day. Thanks for watching, and until next time. Bye bye.